Welcome to another Inside Kids' Minds, the podcast where we explore the psychological world of children and teens, one topic at a time.
This podcast is powered by advanced AI technology and supported by extensive human-curated research. We've analyzed dozens of peer-reviewed studies, government reports, academic theses, and expert insights from leading global institutions to bring you trustworthy, evidence-based content.
Whether you're a parent, educator, psychologist, or just someone who cares, this episode is packed with the latest findings and practical understanding to help decode the minds behind bullying dynamics.
Today, we're tackling a really critical issue, one that touches the lives of, well, nearly every young person: bullying in schools. It's something many of us have witnessed, maybe even experienced, and our aim today is really to move beyond just the surface-level idea, and explore the latest research on its emotional, cognitive, and social impacts. These things can really ripple through a child's development.
Exactly. This isn't just about, kids being kids.
Yeah.
We've gathered a whole range of sources here. Really in-depth research articles, meta-analyses.
Which are those studies that combine results from lots of other studies, right, to get the bigger picture?
That's it, precisely. They give us a much broader view. And we also have some really insightful reports. Our mission really is to provide a clear, comprehensive understanding of bullying.
So looking at how common it is, its effects.
Exactly. Its prevalence, its profound effects, and maybe most importantly, the evidence-based strategies we can actually use to address it.
Okay, so let's start by unpacking this term. When we talk about school bullying, what exactly are we describing?
So, at its heart, school bullying is a form of aggressive behavior, but it can take several forms.
Right.
We often think of the physical side, hitting, pushing.
The obvious stuff.
The obvious stuff, yeah. Or verbal attacks like name-calling, taunting.
Yeah.
But it also includes more indirect tactics, things like intentionally excluding someone from social activity.
Isolation, yeah.
And increasingly, we're seeing cyberbullying. That's spreading rumors or posting hurtful things online.
And this isn't just something limited to younger kids, is it? I mean, it changes as they get older.
Well, while bullying can unfortunately happen at any age, the research consistently points to middle school adolescence as the time when it's most prevalent.
Okay.
But it's also really crucial to understand that even if bullying doesn't happen frequently, even those isolated incidents can have significant negative consequences.
Right. For their emotional well-being, how they think, how they interact.
Exactly. It doesn't need to be a daily thing to leave a lasting mark.
Okay, now here's where I thought it got really interesting. Our sources looked into the different kinds of social support networks that students who are bullied actually have. It sounds like whether certain kinds of support are there or not there can really shape their whole experience.
Absolutely. Researchers have actually identified several distinct patterns or profiles of social support among students who are being bullied.
Okay, what?
So you have those mainly supported offline, by people physically around them, family, teachers, maybe classmates. Then there are those who have support both online and offline.
Ah, okay.
Then you've got those with maybe a moderate level of support, some who primarily just rely on one close friend, and sadly, those who report feeling pretty much unsupported.
And I guess these patterns aren't just random. Our sources mention some demographic links.
That's right. They're not random. Younger adolescents, for instance, are more likely to be in that offline supported group.
Which makes sense. They rely more on nearby adults.
Exactly. They're often looking more to parents, teachers for help and guidance. But interestingly, as adolescents get older, they tend to try and handle bullying more on their own.
A desire for independence, maybe?
Yeah, perhaps reflecting that growing desire for autonomy.
What about other factors like gender or family background?
Well, girls are more frequently found in that online-offline supported category. And this kind of fits with other research suggesting girls often use social support as a coping strategy, and they tend to seek it from various places.
Okay.
Boys, on the other hand, are more often categorized as having moderate support. And here's a really important point, especially for parents or educators listening. Adolescents from higher socioeconomic status families are more likely to be primarily supported offline. This might indicate, greater access to resources or perhaps stronger family support systems.
So thinking about that profile, relying just on a close friend, is having that one really close friend always enough? Is it always protective?
That's where it gets a bit more nuanced, actually. While close friendships are, of course, incredibly valuable,
Sure.
research indicates that really strong support, just from a single close friend, might not be enough if there's a lack of support from other key sources like parents, teachers, even classmates. In fact, there's even a potential downside called co-rumination.
Co-rumination, what's that?
It's where friends sort of repeatedly go over and focus on negative experiences together. It might feel supportive in the moment, validating feelings.
Yeah, like you're venting together.
Exactly. But that intense shared focus on the negative can actually end up amplifying the harmful effects of the bullying. It seems the best outcomes, psychologically and socially, are linked to having a broad network.
A comprehensive network.
Yeah, support from multiple sources seems key.
It makes a lot of sense. Because bullying hits so many different areas, emotions, belonging, even learning you'd need support from different angles. Okay, let's shift to a really big area, mental health.
Right. And the evidence here is just overwhelming. There's a very strong link between being bullied and decreased mental well-being.
In what ways?
Lower overall happiness, less satisfaction with life, and definitely increased rates of depression and anxiety.
And it's not just the person being bullied who's affected, right? What about kids who see it happening?
That's a crucial point.
Oh.
Witnessing bullying can also lead to something called moral injury.
Moral injury.
Yeah, imagine a child seeing another student constantly being mistreated. It can deeply affect their sense of fairness, their sense of safety at school. And it can contribute to, normalizing that kind of aggressive behavior.
Wow. And these consequences, they don't just disappear after school ends, do they?
Tragically, no. Long-term studies, studies following individuals who were bullied as children, they found increased rates of various psychiatric disorders.
Like what?
Things like agoraphobia, depression, anxiety disorders, panic disorders, even up to 14 years later. So well into their early or mid-20s.
14 years later, that's significant.
It really is. And there's also a significantly higher risk of suicidal thoughts and even attempts. Beyond that, frequent, intense bullying can lead to a state of chronic stress, often called toxic stress.
Toxic stress.
And that can harm not just psychological health, but physical health and even cognitive development too.
This is really sobering stuff. It underscores why getting in early and intervening effectively is just so critical. Now, our sources also specifically highlighted a group that's particularly vulnerable in schools: students with disabilities.
Yes, absolutely. Learners with emotional, intellectual, and communication disabilities face a disproportionately higher risk of experiencing school violence and bullying.
Can you give us a sense of the scale?
Well, just to illustrate, research from China found that 2 out of every 3 secondary school students with intellectual disabilities reported being victimized.
2 out of 3.
And in the U.S., one study found a staggering 3 out of 4 elementary school kids with emotional disabilities had experienced verbal abuse just in the past month.
That's an incredible disparity. Why are these students more vulnerable?
It's likely a combination of factors. For girls and young women with disabilities, they might be more prone to internalizing societal messages of rejection.
Leading to negative self-image.
Exactly. Which can increase vulnerability to various forms of victimization, sadly, including sexual victimization. And boys and young men with disabilities also face a heightened risk of sexual violence compared to their non-disabled peers.
And what about online? Cyberbullying.
Yeah, in the digital world, cyberbullying can be a particularly insidious form of psychological or even sexual bullying. And some research suggests that students with ADHD might be more likely to be involved, sometimes as targets, sometimes as perpetrators.
It's a really powerful reminder that any anti-bullying efforts absolutely have to be inclusive and address the specific vulnerabilities these students face.
Yeah.
So, okay, what does the research tell us works? What about effective prevention and intervention strategies?
Encouragingly, there's good evidence that educational programs designed for children and youth are effective, especially in improving outcomes related to online violence, particularly cyberbullying.
So they can reduce it.
Yes, these programs have been shown to reduce both kids doing the cyberbullying and kids being victims of it.
Okay.
And a really key element for making these youth programs even stronger is including parent components.
Getting parents involved.
Yeah, it helps create a more consistent message and support system. We've actually seen successful cyberbullying prevention programs developed and implemented in various countries, offering some valuable models.
That's good to hear. What about specifically tackling online sexual exploitation and abuse within these programs? That seems really tricky.
It is, and it's critical that programs handle this thoughtfully. The content needs to be accurate and genuinely useful for young people. One vital piece is challenging that common misconception that online predators are always strangers.
Right, the stranger danger idea doesn't fully cover it online.
Not at all. It's essential to educate young people that, unfortunately, individuals they know, maybe through family, school, social activities, can also be involved in grooming and online sexual exploitation.
Okay. And looking more broadly at general anti-bullying interventions in schools, what kind of overall effectiveness do we see?
Well, those meta-analyses we mentioned earlier, the ones combining lots of studies, they show that general anti-bullying interventions can lead to, on average, about a 19% reduction in bullying behavior.
19%.
Mm-hmm.
Are there specific programs that are well-known or researched?
Yes, several. Some names people might recognize are the Aldius Bullying Prevention Program, Kiva, VSC, No Trap. These have been widely studied.
And what makes these programs work? What are the effective ingredients?
Several factors seem important. Things like consistent and active supervision on playgrounds, clear disciplinary approaches for bullying that are applied consistently.
Right.
Meaningful engagement with family is crucial, and effective classroom management techniques. Generally speaking, programs that are more intensive, more components, more time dedicated, tend to have a bigger impact.
The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, they also have advice, right? More practical tips for parents and educators.
Yes, they do. Their recommendations include things like helping kids understand what bullying actually is and how to respond safely, maintaining really open and ongoing communication with kids.
Just keeping those lines open.
Exactly. Encouraging them to develop hobbies and interests, things that can build confidence and social connections outside of maybe difficult peer situations. And perhaps most importantly, modeling kindness and respect ourselves.
Leading by example.
Absolutely. In our own interactions and relationships.
Now, for students who've gone through chronic bullying, the effects can be really deep, as we've discussed. Our sources mention trauma-informed approaches. Can you explain that?
Yeah, given the significant mental health impact, trauma-informed approaches are increasingly recognized as really essential for supporting students who've been repeatedly bullied.
Okay.
These approaches basically acknowledge that chronic bullying can be a traumatic experience. So the focus is on creating a school environment that feels safe, predictable, and supportive.
To promote healing.
Exactly. Promoting healing and resilience in those students who've been affected.
And what about something called restorative practices? How does that fit in?
Restorative practices offer a slightly different angle. Instead of focusing solely on punishment for the bullying behavior.
Which often happens.
Yes. They prioritize building and strengthening relationships within the whole school community and then repairing the harm that's been done by the bullying.
So focusing on relationships and repair.
Precisely. And school counselors who've implemented these practices have reported positive outcomes like better student relationships and maybe increased empathy. But
there's always a but.
There often is. There can be challenges to implementing them effectively, like just not having enough dedicated time. Sometimes resistance from adults who might have more punitive mindsets.
Right.
And it absolutely requires consistent support from the school administration to really work.
It sounds like school psychologists must be right in the middle of all this.
Yeah.
What did our sources say about their role and how they see bullying?
Yeah, school psychologists definitely see bullying as complex. They understand it's deeply influenced by the specific culture and environment of each individual school.
It's not one size fits all.
Not at all. And how they get involved often depends on how an incident is first reported. Does a teacher bring it up? The principal? Does the student themselves come forward?
Okay.
From their perspective, effective intervention really relies heavily on strong collaboration among all the school staff. Building positive, trusting relationships with students is key, and actively involving the wider community, parents, local groups, in creating a safer school climate.
What do they tend to focus on in interventions?
They often emphasize things like teaching empathy, really developing those skills, and also peer-to-peer conflict resolution skills among students, helping kids navigate disagreements constructively.
But I imagine it's not always smooth sailing for them either. What challenges do school psychologists face?
Oh, definitely. They face several significant challenges. Sometimes school administration might prioritize, let's say, quick fixes or superficial action.
Like forcing an apology.
Exactly, like a forced apology, rather than digging into the underlying systemic issues that allow bullying to happen. A lack of strong, consistent support from the principal can be a major hurdle.
And time. I bet time is an issue.
Huge issue. The significant time constraints they often work under can really limit their ability to collaborate effectively with other staff or spend enough time with students. And another big one is working with the parents of students who bully.
That must be tough.
It can be incredibly challenging, especially if those parents are resistant to acknowledging the problem, or aren't cooperative in finding solutions.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to bystanders. The kids who witness bullying. It's often said their actions or maybe their inactions really matter.
That's absolutely right. Bystanders are actually present in the vast majority of bullying incidents.
A majority. Wow.
Yes, yet they often respond passively. Sadly, only a small percentage of students actually step in actively to defend the victim. Well, it's complex. But interestingly, research suggests that bystanders report feeling more able, more self-efficacious, and therefore more motivated to intervene in cyberbullying situations compared to direct face-to-face bullying.
Huh. Why the difference? Cyberbullying versus face-to-face?
It might be because they perceive intervening online as less risky, maybe, or more within their control. It feels less direct, perhaps less confrontational.
Okay.
In direct face-to-face situations, bystanders might, unfortunately, identify more with the student doing the bullying.
Really? Why?
Maybe out of fear of becoming the next target themselves, or just due to the social dynamics within the peer group, wanting to align with perceived power. And that identification can lead to lower motivation to actually help the victim.
So who are the students who do step in? The defenders?
Students who do defend tend to have higher levels of empathy, naturally. They also tend to have a stronger belief in their own social effectiveness. They think they can make a difference. And interestingly, they often hold a higher social status within their peer group already.
Ah, status. That brings up another interesting point. Our understanding of kids who bully has kind of changed over time, hasn't it?
Yes, it really has. We've moved away from only seeing bullies as, socially awkward or maladjusted loners.
Right.
Current research indicates that some students who bully can actually be quite socially skilled. They might be using bullying strategically, almost like a tool.
To gain status.
Exactly, as a way to gain or maintain status among their peers. This seems particularly true during adolescence, when social standing feels so incredibly important.
And for the kids who defend, is it risky for them? Do they become targets?
Generally, the research suggests that defending victims isn't usually a high-risk behavior for the defender themselves. They don't typically become the next target just because they stepped in. However, we probably still need more research to fully understand all the nuances, especially around the potential risks for students who have already been victimized and then choose to defend someone else. That might be a different dynamic.
Right. Okay. Unfortunately, as we've mentioned throughout, the long-term consequences, they can be really significant.
Absolutely. Just to reiterate, bullying can have these profound, lasting negative effects on mental health, on overall well-being, the quality of social relationships. And these impacts can persist decades into adulthood. And it's not just the victims. For young people who engage in bullying behaviors themselves, there's an increased risk of things like substance abuse and academic difficulties later on. And perhaps the most concerning group?
The ones who are both.
Yes, the bully victims. Those who are bullied and bully others. They tend to experience most severe negative long-term consequences across the board.
It really highlights the stakes. Now, one challenge that seems to keep coming up is just defining bullying clearly.
You're right. The absence of a single, clear, universally agreed upon definition can definitely create difficulties.
So,
well, it affects how accurately incidents are reported, for one.
yeah.
And it makes it harder to develop and compare intervention strategies if everyone's working off a slightly different definition.
What do definitions usually include?
Often, they include elements like the behavior creating a hostile school environment. Or they specify that the bullying is directed at individuals based on protected characteristics, things like race, disability, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, and so on.
And legally, schools have obligations.
Yes, in many places, school districts have a legal obligation to collect and report data on bullying incidents, and they have to have established procedures for investigating anything that's reported.
Okay. One last framework our sources mentioned was the diathesis stress model. How does that help us understand bullying?
The diathesis stress model is a way of thinking about how psychological difficulties can develop. It proposes that problems often arise from a combination of two things: an individual's underlying vulnerabilities, that's the diathesis.
Like a predisposition.
Exactly, predisposition. And stressful environmental factors, that's the stress. So in the context of bullying, being involved, whether as the target or the perpetrator, can be a major stressor. And when that stressor interacts with someone's pre-existing vulnerabilities, it can significantly increase the risk of developing mental health issues.
So nature and nurture interacting.
Pretty much. Interestingly, research has even started looking at how specific genetic predispositions related to, say, aggression might interact with the social dynamics and climate of a particular school to influence a child's likelihood of being victimized. It's complex stuff.
Wow. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's just incredibly clear that bullying is, well, it's a really intricate issue, isn't it, with deep and lasting consequences for young people.
Definitely.
It's not just about isolated incidents. It's this complex interplay of individual behavior, peer group dynamics, the kind of support systems kids have or don't have, and the whole school environment.
Exactly. Understanding how all those pieces fit together, social support, mental health, individual differences, including disabilities, bystander actions, the school climate, it's absolutely essential if we want to develop prevention and intervention strategies that actually work and last.
And it really screams for a comprehensive, multifaceted approach, doesn't it? One that brings everyone to the table.
Absolutely. Students themselves, parents, educators, the wider community,
Yeah.
everyone has a role. And prioritizing those evidence-based programs and making sure there's trauma-informed support for kids who've been affected.
Precisely. Which kind of brings us to a final thought for you, the listener. Considering how much the ways young people interact are constantly changing, especially with the digital world,
A huge factor now.
how can we best equip them? Equip them with the resilience, the social emotional skills they need to navigate all these complex challenges? And how do we really cultivate a culture of respect and empathy, both online and offline?
It's a big question.
It is, and it's one that requires ongoing thought and probably ongoing action from all of us.
Well, thanks all for today. Thanks for joining us on another Inside Kids' Minds. We hope today's episode gave you new perspectives on bullying and the psychological layers that often go unnoticed.
Our mission is to combine the power of artificial intelligence with rigorous, human-led research to bring you the most reliable insights into child and adolescent psychology. If you found this episode helpful, informative, or thought-provoking, please subscribe, and don't forget to share it with someone who might benefit from it too.
Until next time, take care and keep listening. Goodbye.